Cella System, Cradle World of Celia, mid-2670. Aleska Telesk, mother of two, wife of Torlak. When morning came, Aleska awoke from her slumber. She looked at O'Brien, who sat on a chair facing out the window, then to her sides. Noticing the lack of pressure, she hurriedly removed the blankets that currently covered her. She found nothing. She then returned a gaze to the sitting O'Brien, his helmet off, as he ate into a protein bar that she didn't recognize. My kids! Where are they?" O'Brien raised his left hand in a calming motion and directed her attention to the kitchen, its door open, and the sounds of laughter erupted from it. Her anxiety slightly lowered, but her instinct as a mother wouldn't allow her to write off her feelings unless she had visual confirmation of their well-being. She stood from her seat, fixing her dress, before making her way to the kitchen, with O'Brien in tow. When she entered, she noticed a considerably large man playing with her son as he continued showing the Terran his toys and making noises with his mouth, mimicking the sounds of ship thrusters and explosions. Her son seemed captivated by the Terran. Next, she directed her attention to the female Terran behind her daughter as they drew on a personal entertainment device. She was deep in concentration when she glanced for a moment at the door to the kitchen, her expression lighting up at the appearance of her mother. "Mama," Alesa said, leaving her seat and taking the pad with her. At the call of his sister, Tor reacted in the same manner, leaving Gray to his own devices and lone toy gifted by the Celian child. She caressed them, holding them tight. She asked them what they were doing, leading Alesa to tell of their morning. "First we woke up and we were hungry, so we asked Miss Elizabeth and she made us food. It was so good." Aleska directed a gaze at the female, then to the sink and noticed her large pans were stacked upon each other. Evidenced with water told her that after cooking, they had cleaned up after themselves. Taking a moment, she did notice a fragrance that wafted in the air. Alesa, noticing this, ran to the countertop, where another one of O'Brien's men leaned against the counter. Badgers handed a wrapped plate to the young girl, who happily took it and trotted back to her mother, who took it. The scene was surreal for her. She sat on a free chair and began to eat her food. O'Brien speculated that she liked the food, as indicated by an increased pace of her eating. "Slow down now," warned Strega. "We don't need an accident." Aleska slowed her chewing, savoring its flavor. As she continued to eat, tears began forming on the corners of her eyes. "Why are you crying, Mama?" Alesa was the first to ask, followed by her youngest. "Is Mummy sad?" "I'm fine, dearest. Now run along with our new friends. I need to speak with, O'Brien?" He responded swiftly. "Yes, Mr. O'Brien. I need to speak with him alone. I'm sure Miss Elizabeth would be willing to play with you both, yes?" Strega nodded and led the children out of the kitchen, who then took charge and led her upstairs, along with Gray and Badgers. After finishing her meal, she turned to O'Brien, who took a seat across from Aleska. "What will happen to us? To my children?" "They'll be with you the whole way. You'll all be safe." Her expression grew grim. To her, it was like she was abandoning not just her people, but her husband. To flee with the enemy would likely be seen as treason by the War Council. How they got information on her, that was something she wanted to know. "Mr. O'Brien," she started, gauging his reaction. When he remained expressionless, she continued, "May I ask who put you up to this? Is that something I can ask?" O'Brien nodded, giving a smirk. "It's not like my boss gave the request, so I wouldn't mind telling you." He relaxed his position in his chair, making direct eye contact with Aleska, slightly unnerving her. "Tell me, you have any living relatives?" She thought seriously for the moment as she tried to name off her family. She stated her obvious parents, but they lived on another part of the continent. She said she had cousins and extended family, but most had lost contact some years ago or just disappeared. She stated that when it came to her family, she didn't have a relationship with them besides her parents, and then a realization dawned on her. "Did you meet with my elder brother, Gruda?" O'Brien nodded. "We met him on Verbis. Had the gall to approach an armed escort, though, I'll give him that." He laughed, reminiscing their first encounter with Gruda as a pseudo-ambassador for the Celians, as well as a trove of cultural and military information. Is he alive?" she choked, fearing the worst. "He's alive," he replied. Said he'd help us if we move his sister and her kids off-world. So here we are." He gave a wink, extending his arms in a wide fashion, emphasizing his presence. "Thank the fathers," she said, clasping her hands together in a praying motion. "He did always care for me. I had thought he died some time ago. To think he made his way all the way to Verbis." Her tone was melancholic, but filled with a warm memory as she recalled the time she spent with him before he left. "In any case, I appreciate your hospitality, even though it is my home." She gave a courteous bow, pulling her dress to the sides, widening it. "It's no problem," he replied, beckoning her to stop her bow. "You don't seem too hurt at the fact that your guards aren't around. Why is that?" Her face grew angry at the mention, her brow furrowed, crinkling the space in between. "I've held no love for our military," she started. "I'm grateful for the work they do on our border, but with what I have seen on the net, I can't feel anything other than disgust. To think my own husband would do that." "You mentioned a name before, Tor?" probed O'Brien, in a curious tone. "Torlak, my husband." Earlier, when his squad shortly arrived at the Sela system, he received an encrypted message from none other than the general of the raiders, Titus Brooke. It was during one of their interrogations that the name was dropped and was made as a target marked for capture. However, O'Brien had other plans intended for the enemy's general equivalent. "I know of him. He's a chief general, correct?" She nodded. "The highest and only title for those tasked to wage war as ordered by the War Council. They are solely responsible for commanding our armies." That name again. He had heard it several times, and it was essentially the governing body for the Selian people. By its name alone, he made an educated guess that they were continuously locked in a war, long before the Terrans showed up, with the Galactic Union as mentioned by a Gruda some time ago. "Do you think that they would be the ones to initiate the order to slaughter my people?" he questioned. His words were coarse, but they rang true. Alesa confirmed as such with a nod of her head. "The Chief General must abide by their will. Should he deny them?" She trailed off, not wanting to finish her sentence, but she regained her courage and continued. "Then their family would be executed." He could hear her voice choke at the mention. Her knees collapsed under their weight, but O'Brien supported her by placing his arm on her back, gently. She seemed as if she had fallen ill from the realization alone. "They would have killed my entire family." She raised her voice involuntarily. "That's why they were here. There's no need to watch over the wife of a chief commander, let alone a general." Tears began streaming down her face at the realization of the troops around her home. They would have executed Alesa and her children, or taken them elsewhere and only say that they followed orders. It would have been a fate worse than death, which O'Brien and his team inadvertently prevented. "When did they arrive?" he asked, patting her on the back in a calming manner. "Thank you." She placed her weight on O'Brien as she tried to regain her balance. "Just shortly after my husband left for the out colonies, a little over a month ago. That was the first we had been sent guards." After O'Brien and his team first arrived on planet, Alesa and her home were already in the presence of her guard. He had expected there to be more to the group for protecting the wife of a general of the Empire, but that appeared not to be the case. After regaining her footing, she returned to the floor, this time in a prostrating posture, and apologized to O'Brien. "On behalf of my people, I can do nothing but apologize for what my husband and the council have allowed to commit against our stellar neighbors." Her figure laid over her own as she rested on her legs and bent her torso forward while placing her hands in front of her head as her forehead touched the ground. It was similar to apologetic postures of the Oriental cultures back home. "If taking my life is too light a punishment, then I offer my body—" O'Brien rested a hand on her shoulder and she flinched at his touch. "Raise your head," he spoke in a soft and comforting tone. "You shouldn't resign your life so easily like that. You should not have to bear the punishment from the actions of another," he said, lending a hand for her to grab, which she took, and he propped her up once more. Her expression was one of embarrassment, but O'Brien overlooked her earlier prostration and continued where he left off. "Besides, you have children to look to, and I'm not trying to be a father anytime soon." Clarity rushed Alesca, and she was aware of her recent actions, bowing and apologizing profusely before he made her stop once more. "I will need something else from you, however. I will do my best to assist, Mr. O'Brien," she replied, slowly regaining her composure. "Gonna need you to write a note to your husband that you're being taken to a secure bunker. If he thinks you're safe, then that'll make it easier for me and my troops." She nodded and began writing her letter. In the meantime, O'Brien ordered his squad to secure the surrounding homes and dumped the bodies of the guards out of the vision of the children. When Alesca finished her letter, Strega scanned it for translation, checking if she input a secret phrase of code that could jeopardize their mission. If she was playing with them, then he wasn't sure if he could stop himself from putting a bullet in her and dropping the children on an outer colony planet. When Strega confirmed that the letter was code-free, he washed away the thoughts as quickly as he generated them. "Where now?" Alesca asked. He directed them to outside the home. "Are leaving, Mama?" Alesa asked as she stepped out onto the paved entrance walkway. She nodded. "We're all going on a trip on a new ship." The mention of a new ship sparked the young boy's intrigue as he began a rapid exchange of questions, with Gray easily answering them as fast as they came. "If everything goes smooth, you'll be off planet in the next hour." They had to wait no longer than a few minutes before a ship approached from their overlook camp. The awe of the children were apparent as the ship approached closer to their location and decelerated, orienting itself so that the rear ramp faced them and opened. The ship was called a Vulture, but the one at their disposal was a stealth variant. It started off as a gunship, as its primary role with stealth as the secondary trait. However, it was fast for its size, and it held a small accompaniment of troops. With the ramp open, two figures hung on the side of the ramp as the ship leveled itself and made a short landing, with the ramp about 20 feet from where they stood. Darien exited the ramp, including his spotter, as soon as it was fully extended. "Welcome back, Dare." "Rah," he grunted in response, and made his way to the back of the group, and his spotter reunited with others of similar rank, exchanging stories of the most recent events. Darien carried with him an OD olive-colored bag that was nearly the length of his person on his back. O'Brien had an idea of what it was in it, as Dare still had his marksman rifle slung across his chest. After they were cleared, an air crewman who stood behind Darien and his spotter stepped off the ramp and stood before O'Brien. "Sir," one of the air crewmen called out, directing a gaze to the first aliens he's seen in his lifetime. "Are these the assets?" "They are," he replied. "Treat them well. They're my guests." "Aye, sir." The air crewman pointed at the alien family and ordered them aboard. "You three, let's go." The young boy was first, and next was Alesa. Both were supported by the crewmen. Their embarkation was quick, leaving no time for a proper departure, but understood that it had to be this way. Alesca was the last to board, but she turned one more to the helmetless O'Brien. "Again, I'm sorry for everything. I do wish we had met under better circumstances." "We probably wouldn't have, but I could entertain the thought," he replied, receiving a light chuckle from the woman. "Perhaps. Until next time, then, Mr. O'Brien." She gave a bow, wrapping her arms across her stomach, and took her seat slowly, like she had some pains in the lower back and abdomen. O'Brien then turned to Badgers and Hunter, who stood just a few feet away. "Escort them and get them situated. Also, have medical take a look at the missus. She might have gotten sick in our proximity. When you're done, come back here with the gunship." "Air, sir!" They hopped on the ramp, and the crewmen waited until they were seated before signaling for the pilots to take off. The ramp closed during its ascent and rapidly gained speed from where it originally came and then pulled up, making a sharp incline until it could no longer be seen with the naked eye.